The wind that night howled like a wounded animal across the frozen fields, and if it hadn't been for the dog's sudden, desperate barking, she would have died alone in the snow. For years, the only heartbeat inside that quiet farmhouse belonged to a man who had once led missions in the darkest corners of the world. Now, it was just him and the dog, and the silence. But sometimes, fate does not knock politely. Sometimes, it collapses at your fence, bleeding and barely breathing. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that even the most broken souls can heal, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us why compassion still matters. Chief Petty Officer Daniel Hayes had been called many things during his time as a Navy SEAL. Precise. Unbreakable. Relentless. But no one had ever called him lonely. That word didn't fit the man who could endure weeks without sleep, who could hold his breath beneath freezing water, who could make life-and-death decisions without hesitation. Yet loneliness had settled on him like dust after the war. He moved to the edge of nowhere after retiring, an old farmhouse miles from town, surrounded by fields that turned gold in summer and merciless white in winter. There were no neighbors close enough to wave at, no sounds but the wind, the creaking wood, and the faint hum of memory that never quite faded. The only soul who truly shared his world was Atlas, a Belgian Malinois with sharp eyes and a soldier's discipline. Atlas had been his K9 partner during his final deployment. They had walked through fire together. Atlas had once pulled him out from under collapsing debris after an explosion. Daniel owed his life to that dog more times than he could count. When Daniel left the service, Atlas came with him. The first year was the hardest. Daniel woke at 3 a.m. to ghosts that weren't there. He walked the perimeter of his property like it was still a base under threat. He avoided town as much as possible. Crowds made his chest tighten. Sudden noises made his hands curl into fists. He told himself he preferred it this way. Quiet. Predictable. Safe. But quiet has a way of amplifying the past. That night in January, the cold cut like glass. The sky was ink black, pierced by distant stars. Snow blanketed the fields in a deceptive calm. Daniel had just finished stacking firewood when Atlas stiffened near the fence line. At first, Daniel thought it was a deer. Atlas's posture shifted, alert, tense, ears forward. Then came the bark. Not the warning bark he used for intruders. Not the sharp, commanding one he used during training. This was different. Urgent. Panicked. Daniel grabbed his flashlight and ran. Snow crunched under his boots as Atlas bolted ahead, kicking up powder. The beam of light sliced through the dark, catching on fence posts, barbed wire, and then a shape. Small. Still. She lay curled near the fence, half covered in snow, her dress thin and torn, one shoe missing. Blood had dried along her temple. Her lips were blue. She couldn't have been more than 16. For a split second, Daniel froze. The battlefield came rushing back. Civilians caught in crossfire. Children in rubble. The weight of decisions he could never undo. Atlas nudged the girl's hand and whimpered. That sound broke the paralysis. Daniel dropped to his knees in the snow, fingers searching for a pulse. Faint. Weak. But there. She's alive, he whispered, though there was no one to hear it. He shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking her airway, stabilizing her neck, scanning for major bleeding. The training he thought he had buried under years of isolation surged forward like instinct. He lifted her carefully, cradling her against his chest. She weighed almost nothing. Inside the farmhouse, he laid her near the fireplace and stoked the flames higher. Atlas stayed close, eyes locked on the girl as if guarding her from the cold itself. Daniel called for an ambulance, giving precise coordinates. The dispatcher's voice sounded distant, almost unreal, as he described her condition. Help was at least 20 minutes away. 20 minutes in this temperature could mean everything. He knelt beside her, rubbing her arms to restore circulation. Her eyelids fluttered once, but she did not wake. Her breathing was shallow. "Stay with me," he murmured, voice rough. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she came from or who had hurt her. But in that moment, none of it mattered. She was a life hanging by a thread, and he would not let that thread snap. When the paramedics finally arrived, their red lights flashed against the snow like distant fire. They worked quickly, asking questions Daniel could barely answer. She was loaded into the ambulance, oxygen mask secured, started. One of the paramedics paused before closing the doors. "You found her?" "My dog did," Daniel replied, glancing at Atlas. The ride to the hospital felt longer than any mission he had ever endured. He followed in his truck, hands tight on the steering wheel. He told himself he could leave once she was admitted. That he had done his part. But he didn't leave. Hours passed in the sterile waiting room. Atlas lay at his feet, unusually quiet. The hospital lights hummed overhead. A doctor finally approached. Hypothermia. Concussion. Dehydration. Signs of physical assault. But she was stable. "She's a fighter," the doctor said. Daniel nodded, a strange tightness rising in his chest. The police arrived soon after, asking questions about where she was found. There were no reports yet of a missing girl matching her description. No identification on her. She was alone. The word echoed uncomfortably. Daniel returned home just before dawn, but sleep never came. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her lying in the snow. He heard Atlas's bark. For years, he had chosen isolation. It had felt like control. But seeing her there, abandoned, broken, had cracked something open inside him. The next morning, he drove back to the hospital. She was awake. Her eyes were wide and uncertain, scanning the room as if expecting danger. A nurse explained that he was the one who found her. For a moment, fear flickered across her face when she saw his broad frame and military posture. Then Atlas stepped forward. The transformation was instant. Her gaze softened as the dog approached gently, tail low, movements careful. Atlas rested his chin on the edge of her bed. Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch his fur. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Her name was Lily. She had run away 2 days earlier from a man who had been living with her mother. Things had escalated. She didn't want to give details, but the bruises spoke loudly enough. She had tried to walk to the next town. She had lost her way when the snowstorm hit. "I thought I was going to die," she admitted quietly. Daniel felt the words settle heavily between them. He knew what it felt like to stare at death and believe it was the end. Child services became involved quickly. There was talk of temporary placement. Paperwork. Procedures. Daniel surprised himself when he asked how long that process would take. "Why?" the social worker asked. He hesitated. The old instinct to withdraw urged him to step back, to return to his safe silence. But then he looked at Lily, sitting upright now, Atlas at her side. For the first time since he had met her, there was a hint of color in her cheeks. His house was quiet. Too quiet. "I have room," he said. The next weeks felt unfamiliar, almost unreal. Lily moved into the spare bedroom while arrangements were sorted out. She was withdrawn at first, flinching at sudden sounds, waking from nightmares. Daniel recognized the signs. He did not push her to talk. Instead, he fixed the loose hinge on her door so it wouldn't creak. He showed her how to chop wood safely. He cooked simple meals and left extra blankets outside her room when the temperature dropped. Atlas became the bridge between them. The dog followed Lily constantly, as if assigned a new mission. She laughed for the first time when Atlas attempted to catch snowflakes with exaggerated seriousness. The farmhouse began to change. Laughter replaced silence. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. The kitchen smelled of baking instead of just coffee and firewood. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Lily asked him why he lived alone. Daniel stared into the flames for a long moment. He told her pieces of the truth. About the service. About losing teammates. About coming home and feeling like a stranger in his own country. "I thought being alone would make it easier," he admitted. "Does it?" she asked. He looked at her. Really looked at her. At the strength hidden beneath fear. At the resilience in her quiet eyes. "No," he said softly. "It doesn't." Healing did not come all at once. There were setbacks. Days when Lily shut down completely. Nights when Daniel paced the floors, memories clawing at him. But they were no longer fighting alone. Spring arrived slowly, melting the snow that had nearly claimed her life. The fence where she had been found stood unchanged, but it no longer felt like a boundary between life and death. It felt like a turning point. The investigation eventually led to the arrest of the man Lily had fled from. Her mother entered rehabilitation. Custody arrangements shifted in Lily's favor. Through it all, Daniel remained steady. The man who had once believed his purpose ended with his uniform began to understand something profound. Purpose does not disappear. It waits. Sometimes, it arrives in the form of a bark in the night. Months later, the farmhouse no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like a home. Lily planted flowers near the fence as summer approached. Bright yellow ones that caught the sunlight. She said she wanted something beautiful where something terrible had almost happened. Daniel stood beside her, hands in his pockets, Atlas sitting proudly between them. He realized then that saving her had not just changed her life. It had saved him, too. If this story touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories of hope and second chances alive. And before we end, I have a special request. Comment the word hope if you believe even the coldest nights can lead to the brightest mornings. Because sometimes, the bravest battles are not fought overseas. Sometimes, they are fought quietly, in farmhouses, in hospital rooms, in the fragile space between strangers who choose to care. A Navy SEAL lived alone for years, believing isolation was strength. But it took a loyal dog and a dying girl at a fence to remind him that strength is not measured by how much you can endure alone. It is measured by how willing you are to open the door when someone needs you most. And on that frozen night, when Atlas barked into the darkness, a new mission began. One not of war, but of healing.